The intergalactic marketplace was bustling with life, its neon lights flickering and casting strange shadows on the vast, metallic walls. Aliens from all corners of the universe roamed the space station, their voices blending into a chaotic hum of languages and trades. There were towering creatures with multiple arms, graceful beings with shimmering skin, and others whose features were entirely unrecognizable to a human eye. Amid this diversity stood Zilla, the alien woman who always felt out of place. Zilla's skin was a pale blue-purplish hue, a shade that contrasted sharply with the vibrant colors of the other beings around her. Her eyes, though wide and expressive, were too large for her kind's typical beauty standards, and her ears, small, like those of a human, seemed to be one of her greatest sources of discomfort. In a world where elegance and symmetry were cherished, she felt like an unpolished stone among finely cut gems. She moved through the crowd carefully, avoiding eye contact, her head slightly lowered. She had long ago learned that standing out in a crowd like this wasn't a blessing. People didn't look at her the way they did at others. Instead, they glanced at her with curiosity or even pity. At times, she'd overhear whispers, and the words ugly or strange would drift through the air. Zilla had grown used to it, but the pain never quite left. Zilla wasn't just an alien in a crowded marketplace. She was an outcast in her own right. Most of the beings on this station, known for its diversity, carried their own beauty. Either it was in the graceful lines of their bodies, the radiant shimmer of their skin, or the perfectly balanced symmetry of their features. She had none of those qualities. At least that's what she believed. Every day, she struggled to keep her feelings in check, to hide her sorrow behind a mask of indifference. The day had started like any other. She'd woken up early, as she always did, trying to get a few moments of solitude before the world outside demanded her attention. Her small room, located on the outskirts of the station, was quiet and peaceful, a welcome contrast to the loud and chaotic world outside. But as soon as she stepped outside, her confidence seemed to evaporate. The moment her foot touched the cold, metallic floor of the marketplace, the familiar ache in her chest returned. People didn't look at her as they looked at others. She was simply invisible, or worse, an oddity. Zilla spent her morning doing what she did best, working quietly and keeping to herself. She helped where she could, fixing small machines or cleaning up areas that no one else seemed to care about. She had a knack for technology, and it was one of the few things that made her feel useful. Her skill with machines was something that even the more skilled engineers acknowledged, though they never gave her any real recognition. They simply accepted her for what she could do and nothing more. As she worked, she noticed a group of aliens from a nearby species laughing and pointing at something. Zilla didn't need to look closely to know they were laughing at her. She could feel their eyes on her, even without turning her head. She tried to ignore it, focusing on her task, but the sting of their laughter lingered. She sighed, pushing away the feeling of helplessness that always seemed to follow. But then something unexpected happened. A voice interrupted her thoughts. It was soft, but steady. A human's voice. "Excuse me, are you okay?" Zilla looked up, startled. She wasn't used to being addressed like this, especially not by humans. Most humans on the station kept to themselves, interacting with the other alien races, but never making the effort to connect with someone like her. Standing in front of her was a young man, about her age, dressed in a simple uniform with the insignia of the peacekeeping force. His eyes were kind, and though there was curiosity in them, there was no judgment. He wasn't looking at her with the usual gaze of alienation that she had come to expect. Instead, he looked at her as though she were just another person, one worthy of attention. Zilla hesitated, unsure of how to respond. For a moment, the world around her seemed to freeze. It was as if her ears had tuned out all the noise in the marketplace, and only the human's voice mattered. She didn't understand why he was speaking to her, why he cared. Was it sympathy? Was he being polite because of her apparent discomfort? But then, just as the silence stretched on, he smiled, a simple, genuine smile that made her heart skip a beat. "You're beautiful," he said, his words soft but clear. Zila blinked, stunned. The words felt foreign, as though they didn't belong to the world she lived in. Beautiful. Her. It didn't make sense. In all her years, no one had ever said such a thing to her. Not once. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. He didn't know how to respond. She glanced down at the ground, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. But before she could say anything, the human spoke again. "Really," he added, "you're beautiful." And then, without waiting for her to reply, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Zila stood there, rooted to the spot, her mind racing. The noise of the marketplace resumed, but it all felt distant, like the world was moving too fast for her to catch up. She was left standing there, the words "you're beautiful" echoing in her ears. She didn't know why, but for the first time in years, Zila felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The days after the human's unexpected words played in Zila's mind like a song on repeat. At first, she thought it was a mistake. Maybe he had meant to say it to someone else. After all, why would he, of all people, tell her that she was beautiful? She wasn't someone who stood out, at least not in a way that was celebrated. But the words lingered in her thoughts, quietly echoing every time she felt the sting of someone's gaze or overheard another whisper. "You're beautiful," he had said. Those simple words had created a ripple in her mind that she couldn't ignore. Zila tried to keep her distance from others, as she always had. She didn't want to face the cruel judgment that so often followed her wherever she went. The next few days, she worked quietly in the background, fixing small problems that no one else seemed to care about. Her mind wandered back to the human, the peacekeeper who had spoken to her with such warmth. She wasn't sure what to do with this feeling that stirred inside her. It wasn't the first time someone had been kind to her, but it was the first time someone had spoken to her with such sincerity. Zila had never been one to entertain hope. It felt like a fragile thing, something that could easily be shattered. One morning, as she worked in a maintenance corridor, the sound of approaching footsteps caught her attention. Zila looked up quickly, her heart racing. Her first thought was that someone was coming to make fun of her, or maybe to ask her to leave, as had happened many times before. But as she glanced toward the source of the sound, she saw the human again. He was walking toward her with a purposeful stride, looking as though he had something to say. Zila felt her throat tighten. She had hoped that their brief encounter in the marketplace would be the last. She wasn't ready to face him. Not yet. Not when she wasn't sure how to feel about what he had said. The human, noticing her hesitation, slowed his pace and stopped a few steps away from her. He gave her a tentative smile, and she couldn't help but feel a flicker of warmth in her chest. She didn't know why his smile made her heart flutter, but it did. "Hi again," he said, his voice kind but casual, as though it was normal to approach someone like her. Zila couldn't find the right words to respond. She wasn't sure if she should thank him or ignore him, but something inside her urged her to be brave. She forced herself to meet his gaze, and though she felt exposed, she was surprised to find that his eyes didn't carry the judgment she feared. They were simply calm, understanding. You really meant what you said?" Zila asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It was a vulnerable question, one she had never dared ask anyone before. But the human had changed something in her. She wasn't sure what it was, but she felt an unexpected sense of trust in him. The human nodded, his smile growing slightly. "Of course. You are beautiful, Zila." He said her name softly, as though he had known her for a long time, though this was only their second conversation. Zila's heart skipped a beat when he said her name. No one had ever said her name with such care. It was as if he saw her for who she truly was, beyond the surface, beyond the things she'd always thought made her unworthy. It made her feel different, like maybe she wasn't the ugly outcast she believed herself to be. The silence that followed felt heavy. Zila opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come. She wanted to thank him, but her usual self-doubt made it hard to express her gratitude. She had never been good with words, especially not when it came to accepting compliments. It was so easy to dismiss them, to believe they were just part of the polite social dance. But this felt different. "I thank you," Zilla finally managed to say, her voice shaky. She had never felt more self-conscious in her life, but she also felt something else, a flicker of something new and unfamiliar. "Why? Why do you keep saying that? I don't understand." The human took a step closer, his expression softening. "Because it's the truth," he said simply. "I'm not saying it to be nice. I'm saying it because it's how I see you." Zilla stared at him, trying to understand what he was saying. People didn't look at her that way. No one had ever looked at her with such openness, without judgment, without thinking about what she should or shouldn't be. It was as though the human wasn't just seeing her face, he was seeing her heart. A small laugh escaped Zilla's lips, a mixture of disbelief and relief. "I don't think anyone has ever looked at me like that before." The human smiled again, this time a little wider. "Well, maybe they should, because you're one of the most unique and interesting people I've met here." His words were simple, but Zilla could feel their weight. She had never thought of herself as interesting, and certainly not unique. In a world full of more beautiful and accomplished beings, she had always felt like an invisible bystander, watching life pass her by. But here he was, seeing something in her that no one else had. He wasn't focused on how she looked. He was focused on who she was. The realization made her feel a rush of warmth inside, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. I think I need to believe that," Zilla said softly. "Maybe I can start seeing myself differently." "Thank you." The human nodded, as though this was exactly what he had hoped for. "It's a journey, Zilla, but I believe you'll get there. Just don't forget, you are beautiful, inside and out." As he turned to walk away, Zilla watched him go, feeling something stir in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, things could be different now. Zilla spent the next few days in a strange state of mind. The human's words, his kindness, still lingered in her thoughts, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it had all been too good to be true. She had lived most of her life hiding from the world, convinced that her appearance was enough to make her invisible, unworthy of attention. Yet here was this human, speaking to her with such sincerity, calling her beautiful without any hesitation. It confused her. Zilla didn't have time to question his motives, though. Her work in the station continued, and the sounds of machinery and the constant hum of the marketplace filled her days. She focused on what she knew best, fixing things. It was one of the few places where she felt competent and comfortable, where her skills were valued, even if the recognition wasn't always loud. But in between moments of fixing equipment or cleaning the maintenance corridors, her thoughts kept returning to the human. His words played in her mind over and over, and with each passing day, she felt a mixture of doubt and hope. "You're beautiful," he had said. "You're unique." She wasn't sure she believed him. How could she? She had been told her entire life that she was different in the wrong ways. Her skin, her ears, her features, none of it fit the beauty standards of the people around her. On her home planet, her kind valued elegance and symmetry above all. Zilla felt like an oddity compared to the others. She didn't belong. She thought back to the times when she would catch people staring at her, their eyes filled with curiosity or pity. She could almost hear their unspoken words. "Why does she look so different?" They must have wondered. "Why can't she be more like us?" Zilla looked at herself in the reflection of a nearby window as she passed through the crowded corridor. Her pale blue-purplish skin seemed to shimmer slightly in the light, but all she could focus on were the imperfections, the smallness of her ears, the way her features didn't line up with the others. She sighed, the familiar weight of self-doubt pressing down on her chest. She quickly looked away from the glass, not wanting to see herself any longer. But that wasn't the only reason she was unsettled. The kindness of the human was starting to feel like a strange burden. Was it possible that she was just reading too much into it? Maybe he had simply been being polite, or worse, Maybe he was just trying to make her feel better out of sympathy. She didn't want to get her hopes up. She didn't want to believe in something that might not be real. As she worked, she found herself feeling more and more disconnected from the people around her. She wasn't sure how to fit in. The others still treated her like they always had, and she couldn't stop comparing herself to them. They moved in graceful, fluid ways, their skin shimmering in hues that were considered beautiful. She couldn't help but feel like an outsider. Zila's moments of isolation were the hardest to bear. There were times when she caught herself wishing that she could be someone else, someone who wasn't so easily dismissed by the world. But then, there were the moments when she remembered the human's words. Maybe she wasn't all wrong. Maybe there was more to her than just her appearance. She sat down on a bench near the marketplace one afternoon, in deep in thought. Her mind kept circling back to him, the human who had told her she was beautiful. She wasn't sure if he was just being kind, or if he genuinely saw something in her that others didn't. She wanted to believe it. She wanted to believe that there was more to her than the broken pieces she had spent years hiding. But the doubts, the fears, were still there, lurking in the back of her mind. Just as she was about to stand up and walk away, the human appeared again. She froze, unsure of what to do. The last time they had spoken, his words had caught her off guard, and she had barely known how to respond. Now she was even more uncertain of herself. What would he say this time? What if he had meant it all as a passing compliment and didn't truly care? He approached her with that same calm expression, his eyes warm as he smiled. "Hey, Zila," he greeted her, sitting down beside her on the bench without hesitation. "You okay?" Zila felt her heart race, but she didn't know how to answer. She didn't want to admit that she was struggling, that she was still haunted by the question of whether she was truly beautiful, or if the human had simply been too polite to say anything else. She felt like a child, confused and unsure of the world around her. I'm fine," she finally replied, though her voice betrayed her. It was hard to hide the doubts she was carrying. I keep thinking about what you said." The human raised an eyebrow, curious. "What about it?" Zila looked away, staring at the busy marketplace in front of them. The colors, the sounds, they felt distant now, as though she wasn't truly part of it. "You said I was beautiful, but I don't know. I've never thought of myself that way." The human was silent for a moment. Then he gently turned her face toward him, his eyes locked onto hers. "Zila, I meant it," he said, his voice steady. "You're beautiful, inside and out. It's not about how you look. It's about who you are, the person you've become. You're unique. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're not enough. Because you are." Zila felt a lump form in her throat, her heart beating faster. He wasn't just speaking to her about her looks. He was speaking to her soul, to the part of her that had been hidden away for so long. For the first time, she felt like someone truly saw her, not as an outcast, not as someone broken, but as someone worthy of love and respect. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. She didn't know what to say. For the first time in her life, she wasn't sure she needed to say anything at all. His words were enough. The days following their conversation felt different. Zila couldn't explain it. Something had shifted inside her, like a tiny seed of hope had been planted. She still wasn't sure how to truly believe the human's words, but she found herself thinking about them more often than she had ever expected. Every morning, she would wake up to the same cold, metallic walls of her small room on the station. The noise of the busy marketplace echoed through the hallways as the station came to life. But instead of the usual feeling of isolation, she felt a strange sense of possibility. There was something different in the way she moved through the space now, as though she was beginning to believe that maybe she was not as invisible as she once thought. Zila still had moments of doubt. When the whispers about her looks reached her ears, or when she caught people staring at her with judgment, it was hard to shake the feelings of inadequacy that had plagued her for so long. But when she remembered the human's words, when she thought about how he had seen her in a way no one else had, it became a little easier to face the world. One afternoon, Zilla found herself in the main hub of the space station, her attention focused on a malfunctioning display panel. She had been called to fix it, a routine task she had done 1,000 times before. As she worked, she noticed a few people nearby, standing around and talking. They weren't looking at her, but she still felt their presence. She felt that familiar wave of discomfort wash over her, the one that made her wish she could disappear. But something was different this time. Zilla didn't shrink away. She didn't retreat into the shadows like she normally would. Instead, she focused on the task at hand, trying her best to ignore the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. Slowly, she began to realize that no one was really paying attention to her, not in the way she feared. They were simply going about their business. For the first time, she felt calm. She wasn't looking for validation from anyone else. She wasn't hoping for someone to compliment her or acknowledge her presence. She was just focused on doing the job she was good at. As she worked, she felt a tap on her shoulder, and she looked up to see the human standing there, a warm smile on his face. He had an easy way about him, a calm presence that made Zilla feel at ease despite the bustle around them. "Hey, Zilla, how's it going?" he asked, his voice friendly and relaxed. Zilla smiled back, feeling a little more comfortable than usual. "It's going well. Just fixing a few things." "You're good at this," he said, gesturing toward the panel. "You always know how to make things work." She blinked, surprised by his words. "I try my best," she replied, feeling a small sense of pride. "It's just what I do." The human nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You know, I was thinking about what you said the other day," he began, "about how you don't believe you're beautiful." Zilla's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to bring it up again. She had been trying to push it from her mind. But now that he mentioned it, the feeling she had been hiding came rushing back. "Why do you keep saying that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you keep calling me beautiful when I don't even see it?" The human paused, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "Because I see you for who you are. Not just the way you look, but everything about you. The way you think, the way you help others, the way you care. That's beautiful." Zilla stared at him, her chest tight. She wasn't used to hearing such words, especially not about herself. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply nodded, her mind racing with a million thoughts. "Don't you think you deserve to see yourself the way I see you?" the human asked gently, as if sensing her inner turmoil. "You're more than just your appearance. You're valuable for what you bring to the world." Zilla swallowed hard, his words settling deep within her. She had spent so many years believing that her worth was tied to how she looked, to how others saw her. But now she was beginning to wonder if maybe there was more to her than she had ever realized. Before she could answer, an alarm sounded across the station, a loud, sharp noise that echoed through the hallways. The human's expression shifted instantly, concern flashing in his eyes. "What's happening?" Zilla asked, her heart racing. "It's a systems malfunction," the human replied. "I need to head to the control room to help. Stay safe here." Zilla nodded, watching him hurry off toward the control room. She couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Something about the alarm felt different, like it was more serious than usual. She quickly finished her task and headed toward the maintenance section to check for any issues. As she moved through the station, the usual hum of activity had turned into a sense of tension. She passed a few engineers who were already hard at work trying to resolve the issue. The tension in the air was palpable, and Zilla's heart began to race. She wasn't sure what was happening, but she knew she had to help. She had been trained for situations like this, and her skills could make a difference. She rushed to the control room, where the human was already coordinating efforts. He looked up when he saw her enter. "Zilla, I'm glad you're here," he said quickly. "We need all hands on deck. The system's been compromised, and we need to restore power." Zilla's hands moved quickly as she took charge of the equipment in front of her. She worked alongside the human, their teamwork seamless. As they worked, Zilla felt a growing sense of confidence. This was her place. This was where she belonged. She wasn't defined by how she looked. She was defined by what she could do, by the strength and intelligence that had always been inside her. As the system flickered back to life, a sense of relief washed over the room. The emergency was over. The human turned to her, his face lighting up with pride. "You did it, Zilla," he said. "You saved us." Zilla smiled, her heart swelling with pride. For the first time, she truly believed that she was enough, just as she was. The days after the crisis settled felt different to Zilla. She walked through the station with her head held a little higher, her steps more confident than they had ever been. People still moved about their business, but she didn't feel as invisible as she once had. For the first time in her life, she was starting to see herself differently, not through the eyes of others, but through her own. Zilla hadn't fully realized it, but the human's words had sparked a change in her. He had seen her for who she was, not just for her appearance. He had treated her like she mattered, like she was important, and that made all the difference. She had been taught all her life to value herself based on how others saw her. But now she was starting to believe that her worth wasn't tied to her looks. It was about her actions, her heart, and the way she connected with those around her. Each day, Zilla worked with more energy, helping where she could, fixing equipment, and supporting those in need. She wasn't just doing it out of duty anymore. She did it because she knew she had something valuable to offer. Her skills with technology, her problem-solving abilities, and her quiet strength had all been overshadowed by her insecurities for so long. But now, she allowed herself to see that these qualities made her special. One afternoon, as Zilla was working on a broken communication device, she felt a familiar presence nearby. She looked up to find the human standing there, watching her with a gentle smile. "Hey, Zilla, how's it going?" he asked, his voice always so calm and steady. Zilla smiled back, feeling an unexpected warmth in her chest. "It's going well. I think I've finally got this working." The human nodded, impressed. "You're good at this," he said. "You've got a real talent for fixing things." Zilla's heart lifted at the compliment. It wasn't the first time he had acknowledged her abilities, but each time it felt like a small confirmation that she was on the right path. She felt proud of her work, and that was a feeling she hadn't had in a long time. "I've been thinking," the human continued, his voice thoughtful. "You've really come a long way. I've noticed how much more confident you've become recently. It's amazing to see." Zilla looked up at him, her smile widening. She hadn't realized how much he had changed until he mentioned it. The confidence wasn't something that had happened overnight, but it was there, growing stronger every day. She had stopped hiding, stopped pretending to be someone she wasn't. She was simply being herself, and that was enough. "I feel different," Zilla admitted. "Like I've finally started to see myself for who I really am." The human smile grew. "I'm glad to hear that," he said. "You deserve to see yourself that way. You're strong, Zilla, in more ways than one." Zilla felt a warmth spread through her at his words. She hadn't expected to hear something so meaningful, but it felt like exactly what she needed to hear. For so long, she had doubted herself. She had questioned her worth, convinced that no one could see beyond her appearance. But here he was, reminding her of everything she had to offer. As the days passed, Zilla continued to find her place on the station. She no longer felt like an outsider, always looking in from the edge of the crowd. She began to form connections with others, slowly building relationships based on mutual respect and understanding. People began to notice her for her skills, for the way she could solve problems and lend a hand when needed. It wasn't always easy, but it was rewarding in a way that nothing else had ever been. One day, Zilla found herself in the marketplace again, walking through the same crowded hallways where she had once felt so small. The noise, the lights, the sea of faces, they no longer overwhelmed her. She had grown accustomed to the chaos, and now it didn't scare her. In fact, she even felt a sense of belonging. As she passed by a group of people, She noticed one of the engineers who had always ignored her before. He looked up and caught her gaze. For a moment, Zilla held her breath, waiting for the usual judgment to flicker in his eyes. But instead, he smiled and nodded at her. "Hey, Zilla," he said, his tone warm. "You're doing great work lately. Keep it up." Zilla blinked, surprised. She had never expected such acknowledgement from him, and it felt like a small victory. She smiled back, feeling a rush of pride. "Thanks," she said, her voice steady. "I appreciate it." As she continued on her way, Zilla realized that something had shifted inside her. She wasn't waiting for approval anymore. She didn't need anyone else to tell her that she was valuable. She had started to believe it for herself. Later that evening, as Zilla sat quietly in her room, reflecting on the day, she thought about everything that had changed since she met the human. He had been the first person to treat her with respect, to see her beyond the surface, and to remind her that she had worth, no matter what she looked like. His words had been the catalyst for her transformation, but it was her own strength and resilience that had carried her forward. Zilla smiled to herself, a sense of peace settling in her chest. She had learned that true beauty wasn't about appearances. It was about strength, kindness, and the courage to be oneself. She was beautiful, not because someone else told her so, but because she believed it now. And that made all the difference. The space station was buzzing with excitement that day. Word had spread that a delegation of leaders from several alien species was visiting to discuss matters of peace and cooperation. The station had always been a neutral ground for different races, but this meeting felt especially important. Zilla had never been one to seek attention, but today she was going to have to step into the spotlight. She was chosen to present some of her recent work to the visiting leaders, a task she was both excited and nervous about. The human, who had become her closest ally, was there offering his usual support. His presence was a comfort to her. He had always seen her strength and abilities, and that made her believe in herself, even when the pressure felt overwhelming. The crowd gathered in the main hall of the station. There were representatives from various species, tall, graceful beings with shimmering skin, creatures with multiple limbs, and others whose features were entirely different from Zilla's. As she looked around, she felt the familiar tug of insecurity. She wasn't like them. She had always thought of herself as different, someone who didn't quite fit in. But today, she wasn't focused on how she looked. She was focused on what she had to offer. The human stood by her side as she approached the front, ready to give her presentation. "You've got this, Zilla," he whispered, giving her a reassuring smile. Zilla nodded, taking a deep breath. She felt her heart pounding in her chest, but this time she didn't let the nerves control her. She had worked hard for this moment, and she wasn't going to let her fears hold her back. She had something valuable to share, and she was ready to show the world. She started her presentation, explaining the technological advancements she had made in the station's communication systems. Her voice was steady, her hand sure as she gestured to the holographic display she had set up. She spoke clearly, focusing on the facts and the work she had done. As she looked around the room, she noticed that the leaders were listening carefully, nodding in approval as she explained her methods and solutions. Zilla felt a wave of pride wash over her. This wasn't about how she looked or how others saw her. This was about the work she had done, the knowledge she had gained, and the difference she was making. For the first time, she truly believed that she was where she was meant to be. As she finished her presentation, the room erupted into applause. Zilla looked up, surprised but grateful. The leaders and representatives were all clapping, their expressions filled with respect. She had done it. She had spoken to them, not as an outsider or someone who didn't belong, but as someone who had earned their attention through hard work and skill. The human, standing in the back, was clapping along with the others. His smile was wide and proud, and Zilla couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude for him. He had believed in her from the beginning, and now she had proven to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. One of the leaders, a tall, elegant being with silver skin and sharp features, stood up and addressed the room. "We have seen many innovations in technology over the years," the leader began, "but what we have seen today is truly remarkable. Zila, your work is groundbreaking. You are a credit to this station and to all the species who call it home." Zila felt her cheeks flush at the compliment, but she didn't shy away from it. She had worked hard to get here, and it was her time to be proud of her accomplishments. As the meeting continued, Zila found herself participating in discussions, offering suggestions, and contributing to ideas. She no longer felt the need to hide in the background. She spoke up with confidence, knowing that her voice mattered. She didn't need to seek validation from others anymore. She had learned to trust in her abilities, and that made all the difference. The human approached her later, after the meeting had ended. His smile was warm, and his eyes sparkled with pride. "I knew you could do it," he said softly. "You were amazing out there." Zila smiled back, feeling the sense of accomplishment that she had never experienced before. "Thank you," she said. "I couldn't have done it without you. Your belief in me, it helped me believe in myself." The human placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of support and friendship. "You had it in you all along, Zila. I just helped you see it." As the day wound down and the station returned to its usual routine, Zila felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had faced her fears, stood before a group of powerful leaders, and held her own. She wasn't just the quiet alien woman who hid in the corners anymore. She was someone who had something valuable to offer, and she was proud of who she had become. The human had been right all along. She was beautiful, not because of her appearance, but because of her heart, her strength, and her ability to make a difference. For the first time, Zila truly saw herself as others saw her. She wasn't defined by her appearance or by what she thought others might think. She was defined by her actions, her skills, and her kindness. Zila knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would still be moments of doubt and times when she questioned herself. But she also knew that she was capable of handling whatever came her way. She had faced the hardest challenge of all, accepting herself, and she had come out stronger on the other side. As the sun set outside the station, casting a golden glow over the vast expanse of space, Zila felt a quiet contentment settle in her heart. She had come a long way, and she was just getting started. The space station had never felt more like home to Zila. Each morning, as she stepped out of her room, she felt a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. The busy marketplace, the hum of machinery, and the colorful bustle of different alien races all felt familiar now, like pieces of a puzzle she was finally fitting into place. Zila had always believed that she would never truly belong. She had spent years hiding behind her insecurities, convinced that her appearance made her an outsider. But now, that was changing. She had learned to see herself differently, not through the eyes of others, but through her own. She had learned to value herself for what she could offer, for her skills, her intelligence, and her kindness. She had proven to herself that she was worthy, and that realization was worth more than any compliment or recognition. It had been a few weeks since the important meeting with the alien leaders, and the station was back to its usual rhythm. Zila continued her work, helping with repairs, solving problems, and contributing to the station's daily operations. But now she didn't do it out of necessity. She did it because she wanted to. She was no longer hiding in the background. She was a part of something bigger, and she was proud of it. The human, who had become her closest friend, had been there every step of the way. He had believed in her when no one else had, and he had shown her that she was capable of more than she ever imagined. He had helped her see that beauty wasn't about what others saw on the outside. It was about the strength and heart that came from within. Zila had learned to appreciate her own worth, and that was a gift she would carry with her forever. One evening, as she was finishing up a task in the maintenance bay, Zila found herself alone with the human. The station had quieted down for the night, and the two of them stood side by side, looking out at the stars through the large observation window. The view was breathtaking, endless stretches of space, dotted with distant stars, planets, and nebulae. It was a reminder of how small the station was in the grand scheme of the universe, but also how much potential there was for growth and discovery. "You've come a long way, Zilla," the human said softly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "I'm proud of you." Zilla turned to him, a small smile forming on her lips. "Thank you. I never thought I would be here. I never thought I would be the one standing here, looking at the stars, feeling like I've found my place." "You've always had a place here," the human replied. "You just had to see it for yourself." Zilla nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. "I think I'm starting to believe that now. I've spent so long trying to be someone I'm not, trying to hide who I am. But now, I see that I'm enough just as I am." The human smiled, his eyes filled with warmth and understanding. "You always have been." They stood there for a few more moments, watching the stars, each lost in their own thoughts. Zilla felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She was no longer defined by the way she looked or by the judgments of others. She was defined by her actions, her character, and the person she had become. The future felt open to her now. There were still challenges ahead, of course. She knew there would be times when doubts would creep back in, when she would question her place in the world. But she also knew that she had the strength to face whatever came her way. She had learned to trust herself, and that trust would carry her through the toughest times. As she walked with the human back to the common area of the station, she felt a sense of hope for the future. She wasn't sure where life would take her next, but she knew she was ready for whatever came her way. She had found her confidence, and that was something no one could take from her. The human turned to her with a playful grin. "So what's next for you, Zilla?" She paused, thinking about all the possibilities. "I think I'll keep doing what I do best, fixing things, helping others, and making the station a better place. But maybe, just maybe, I'll find a way to inspire others the way you've inspired me." The human's grin widened. "I think you already are." Zilla laughed softly, feeling a sense of warmth spread through her. She wasn't just working to survive anymore. She was living, truly living, and that made all the difference. As they reached the common area, Zilla paused and looked out at the stars one last time. For the first time, she saw them not as distant, unreachable points in the sky, but as symbols of possibility. The universe was vast, and there were so many places to explore, so many things to discover. And for the first time in her life, Zilla knew that she had a place in it. She wasn't an outsider anymore. She was a part of something bigger, and that thought filled her with a sense of purpose and hope for the future. "I'm ready for whatever comes next," Zilla said, her voice full of determination, "because I know now that I can handle it." The human smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I have no doubt you will." Together, they walked into the common area, ready to face the future, whatever it might hold. For Zilla, the journey was just beginning, and this time, she knew she was ready.